Certain events throughout history change the course of the world, such as a trivial incident or an impulsive statement. Other events can evolve entirely by accident or by a simple snap decision which can forever alter the course of world events. Here are 5 last-minute decisions that changed the world. Number 5. Buddy Holly. In his short life, Buddy Holly was a prolific composer, innovative live performer, and creative recording artist, and is credited with having invented the classic rock and roll lineup of 2 guitars, bass, and drums. His band's Winter Dance Party tour in 1959 was plagued with logistical problems due to poor planning, the distances between the venues requiring a frenetic travelling schedule in unheated buses, which twice had broken down. His drummer had even been hospitalised for frostbite on the toes, and there was insufficient time to launder their clothing. Out of the blue, Holly made the seemingly pragmatic decision to charter a 4-seater plane from Iowa to the next gig in Minnesota, with a stopover in Fargo, North Dakota. However, on February the 3rd, the pilot of the charter flight took off in foul weather, despite not being qualified to do so, and 5 miles into the journey, the plane crashed in a frozen cornfield, leaving no survivors. The day of the crash has been mourned by Don McLean in his song American Pie as the day the music died. The world lost 22-year-old Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson, all famous musicians who would have otherwise continued to build their giant legacy of original and distinctive rock and roll, but for one snap decision. Number 4. Martin Luther King Jr. The Reverend Martin Luther King was the inspirational voice and face of the American Civil Rights Movement until his untimely end in 1968. His powerful leadership philosophy was based on passive resistance and civil disobedience, with his most memorable public speech starting with the renowned quote, "I have a dream." The line came at the end of a mass rally called the March on Jobs and Freedom in Washington on October the 27th, 1963, culminating in an historic speech delivered by King before the Lincoln Memorial. More than 250,000 people took part in the march, and at that time, the largest ever gathering of protesters in Washington. Prior to King's address, singer and activist Mahalia Jackson, called the Queen of Gospel, performed a powerful resistance song. In his address, King described a racially harmonious society framed around his personal vision of an achievable future. However, in his original preparation of the speech, there was no intention to refer to any dream. Then, towards the end of his speech, an enthralled Jackson cried out, "Tell him about the dream, Martin!" Despite having stuck to his prepared address in its entirety, her passionate plea prompted King to improvise from his heart. He digressed from his prepared notes to make the historic speech, which was to become possibly the most often quoted and inspirational piece of public oration in American history. Number 3. Erwin Rommel. The Allied landing in Normandy on D-Day during World War II was the largest seaborne invasion on record and an important moment in history, paving the way to an Allied victory on the Western Front. In anticipation of such a foray into German-occupied France, Hitler had appointed Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Nazis' most skilled military tactician and dubbed the Desert Fox, to command the coastal defence forces. Apart from needing precise timing and coordination of weather, moon phases and tidal patterns, the success of the Allies' amphibious invasion may have also been attributable to a surprise birthday party. Rommel was a devoted husband who wrote a letter to his wife every day. On a whim, he had decided to surprise her with a small holiday to celebrate her birthday. This would take him away from his post for a few days, significantly but unbeknown to him, just before the Allied invasion. without his extensive battle experience, and even after his recall in the evening, the German so-called Atlantic Wall fortifications were in disarray. Coincidentally, the desperate Nazis were also unable to awaken a sleeping Hitler in order to authorise releasing reserve forces of panzer tanks. Their troops on the ground were thrown into confusion, and the landing proceeded according to the Allies' plan. Had Rommel been present in those crucial moments, the German responses would have been timely and stronger, and much more likely to have thwarted the decisive Allied victory. Number 2. Teddy Roosevelt. Following a successful US presidency ending in 1909, Teddy Roosevelt continued in political life. 3 years later, he was campaigning as a candidate for the Progressive Party in the presidential elections. Calling himself a fit bull moose candidate, he loved to take the stand and make grand speeches. While on the campaign trail in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Roosevelt was carrying a 50-page speech that he had prepared to deliver to a waiting crowd. On his way to the gathering, he decided to single-fold the weighty document and place it in his jacket pocket. This random decision went on to save Roosevelt's life. As he stood to address his audience, a saloon keeper shocked the crowd by targeting Roosevelt, hitting him in the chest. The bullet penetrated the glasses case, but was impeded by the thick wad of paper in his pocket, and the bleeding but undeterred Roosevelt continued to address the crowd for 90 minutes before submitting to medical attention. It's also to his credit that, in the meantime, he had also saved his mentally ill assailant from being mobbed. Roosevelt himself continued his life with that piece of lead permanently lodged inside his body, no doubt thankful of his decision to pocket his verbose pontifications. Number 1. Johann Rall. Johann Rall was born a soldier child in 1726 and went on to become a German colonel. His battle career included fighting in Austria, Scotland, the 7 Years' War, and later for Catherine the Great in Russia. However, he is best known for leading a Hessian brigade in aid of Great Britain in the American War of Independence. In 1776, Rall's troops were camped near Trenton, New Jersey, the night before General George Washington was planning his legendary crossing of the Delaware River. The guard of the Hessian troops was down, as it was Christmas Day, and Rall had been deceived by a spy posing as a loyalist. However, as he sat playing chess or poker with his men, Rall was handed genuine intelligence about the gathering of Washington's troops by local loyalists, warning him of the intended crossing the following night. But the note was in English, which he was unable to read, and in his distracted state, Rall decided to place it in his pocket and decipher it later. The events of Washington's crossing and attacks soon unfolded, and Rall was mortally wounded in the ensuing battle. On being carried to safety, he requested a formal surrender to Washington just before his passing. The note was then found, warning him of the imminent attack in his coat pocket.